Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 851. I started off with e4, and my opponent went e5. And after knight f3, he defended the e-pawn with the move d6. That's known as the Philidor defense. And the move I played, d4, is the main move here, and probably the best, but bishop to c4, the second choice, is also an interesting way to play. Anyway, I've always gone with the d4 here, and putting the question to the center is probably the right idea here. And black has two choices. He can defend the center with knight f6 or knight d7. Knight d7 is the Hannum variation, and it's very solid. Knight on f6 is going to get pinned there, but that also can work out for black as well, or he can take. I've played the Philidor defense. It doesn't have a great reputation. I don't play it in slow games, but I've played it in Blitz. It can be very frustrating to your opponent if you have if you play such a solid defense as the Philidor defense, and sometimes white will overextend himself trying to punish you for playing that way. So it has its points as a blitz weapon, but I think in a slow game, in an over-the-board game, you're just kind of giving away too much in terms of center control to your opponent, especially when you play this way and just take. But the other positions turn out to be kind of cramped as well. Let's see, you can take back with the queen here, and if he brings his knight out, you can pin it. Not that way. Not that way. Pin it with the bishop here. That's an interesting line, but simplest is just to take the pawn with the knight. Now he plays bishop e7. That's a rare move here, but I just continue normal developing, and he does as well, and you'll see we get back to a normal position. So it's pretty standard. And now white has a lot of choices. I went with bishop c4, which is not the most popular choice here, actually. Maybe bishop e2 is best. You can also play with g3 and bishop to g2 as an alternative. I've never played that way myself, but might be interesting to try in this position, or develop the other bishop with bishop to f4. So bishop to c4 has a hidden liability that didn't really come up in the game, but I'll show it to you. So castling is pretty normal here. He castles, I castle. And now this is the point where I can show an example of one of the problems with bishop to c4. He played h6, which is pretty rare here. But he can just take that pawn now because of the fork trick. d5, the bishop drops back, and he gets his pawn back. The thing is that the center is open. White maybe has a slight edge in his better piece placement, but you can see this is a very even position, and so that's a defect to this bishop to c4 move. I probably wouldn't play that next time. Anyway, he didn't go with knight to e4. Other ideas in this position are just developing the knight with c6, knight to c6, or playing the move c6. This is kind of an interesting line too. I thought I would show you c6, rook to e1, and b5. I just wanted to mention this because it's thematic in the Philidor that often you keep these pawns back on the king side, you expand on the queen side, because you are going to be short on space if you don't do something. And I see the bishop can come all the way back here, and he can even continue pushing on the b-pawn, harassing this knight. So anyway, a kind of a dynamic way for black to play. He went with h6, and we're just out of the opening book at this point. And right here, I should probably just continue with normal development, like bishop to e3 or rook to e1. Those are typical moves here. Instead, I went king h1, preparing for this kingside attack. And yeah, the chess engine doesn't appreciate that move, and objectively, it's probably not the best. But in a blitz game, going for the attack is usually a good idea. Can always, even if it's not the strongest move in a particular position, you can always put some pressure on your opponent and see if you can get him to crack and with the shortage of time. So anyway, pushed ahead with f4, and he went bishop to g4. The chess engine likes the move c5 here, kicking my knight back, and then b5. And so this is another example of how with the Philidor, black can gain some space on the queen side and compensate for what white is doing over here in the center and on the king side. But he went bishop g4. See, I moved my queen to the side. He went knight to c6. And now this is the first move that the chess engine thought was really questionable. The others were like minor differences, but apparently I should just take this, and after he takes back, play queen g3, which seems interesting. Well, let's show the line. I'm not entirely sure why black needs to retreat that bishop right away, but I can just kick it and force it back. But the idea is that d5 is good at this point, or e5 is good at this point, and he can't respond with d5 because I'll take his knight, he takes my bishop, I'll take his bishop, so I win an extra piece. So is playing e5 at a point when he can't play d5 seems to be pretty good. And this knight drops back. I guess that was the other threat in this position. If we back up, I was saying I didn't understand why he retreated his bishop to c8 right away, but I guess that's the threat, is e5 forcing his knight away and then taking the bishop. So anyway, this seems to be a good sequence for white because queen g3 is with a threat on that bishop, and so that would have been best play for me. I didn't play the best move here. I went knight f3, so we're back in the range of about even. He went ahead and exchanged here. I took. He played a6, stopping me from pinning his knight over here or playing knight to b5, and maybe he's preparing b5 himself. So I chose to push on with e5 at this point, and he exchanged. I think he still can't really play d5 here. Well, I can just take it in this case. Anyway, he took, and I took, and now he moved his knight to h7. There didn't seem to be any better way. I mean, he could have moved the knight to d7 as well, but chess engine rated those about equally after giving it some time to think. And now, once again, it thinks I should just keep developing with bishop to f4. But I went with queen to g3, and so after this, actually, there's a opportunity for black to just equalize straight away, and maybe even be slightly better with this move, bishop to h4. And the problem is my queen is needed to defend the e-pawn, and so he can just harass my queen indefinitely by going back and forth like this, or he can trade off my dark squared bishop. And now actually my attack is kind of faded, and I have this isolated pawn here, so this is not so great for me. Probably better for black. So anyway, queen g3 was a little bit hasty. I really should finish my development before playing that kind of in that fashion. But it's always tempting to make a move that comes with a threat like this. It's just that he had some bigger threats. Because my threat of taking on h6 is not immediate. If my queen is already under attack, I don't have time to mate him. So I was thinking about my threats, but he had a better threat in that position. Instead, he went knight d4. And this just lets me grab a pawn, because this really does come with a big threat. Now it's too late for him to play a move like bishop h4. I'm just mating. So he went with the bishop to g5, tried to neutralize the pressure this way. And I exchanged, but I come out of this just a pawn up, so I'm doing good for the moment. Even stronger, it turns out, would have been to take on g7 here. He takes, and I'm down a piece momentarily, but there's an interesting sequence here. Rook d1 establishes a pin here, and he's got, and I also have a pin here, so he's got two pinned pieces, and it's really difficult for him to escape all of this. For example, c5 to defend his knight. I can pop my knight into e4 and attack his pinned bishop. So that's a move with tempo, and then I can follow up with c3, hitting the knight. So he just can't hold on to his pieces. So bishop takes g7 would have been an interesting tactical solution to my situation here. Also, it would be even better than what I played. But this is also good. This leaves me a pawn up. And I can't avoid the queen trade, though, so we do get a longer game here. And then I played rook f2, just holding on to my extra material. The chess engine actually prefers to go ahead and give the pawn back with a move like this, say knight here, hitting his rook to g3, hitting his knight. The knight drops back, and then just coming in with my knight threatening to check here, take advantage of the pin on the G file, and that could lead to mate. So this is a pretty strong looking attack here, and that's even better than just holding on to my gains here. And in fact, I end up giving the pawn back anyway as the game proceeds. Yeah, I think also in this line, after rook g3, knight g6, knight e4, I think because of the threats here, he can't really afford to take this pawn right away. I mean, the check would drive the king to the h file, and then there'd be a rook coming over here. It looks pretty bad. Anyway, rook f2 is what I played, and he went with b5 now. So he is taking advantage of this chance to kick my pieces around. I dropped the bishop back to d3, though. I think this is also good, and I'm going to bring my knight into d4 and do that kind of stuff. He plays c5, cementing his knight into that square. So I double first. I bring my rook to f1. He brings his rook to e8. Taking a look at my isolated pawn. Go h4, kicking his knight, forcing the knight to choose where it wants to go. He can't really come forward very easily, so it dropped back here. And it's probably a good move, and also keeps my pawn safe for the moment. And now I played another kind of hasty move. I was, playing logically in a way, bringing my pieces towards his king and playing for the attack, but I wasn't really looking for, his counter threats. And this c4 move is actually pretty good. So what should I play here? Actually, the chess engine gives the move rook to e1, a bit counterintuitive, but after he plays c4, then it gives me this square for my bishop. And I keep my extra material, and I just have to do a little more maneuvering to get the attack organized. The problem with this knight e4 move is it takes that square away from my bishop, and now he plays c4, and I don't really have any good squares for it. So I drop back. He could just trade off my bishop. That also would be fine for black as well, because I would still have this weakness. I would be a pawn up, but it would be kind of a weak pawn, and my attack would be pretty much vanished at that point. But he grabbed the c pawn. That's also an okay move here. And now I went with knight d6. So I get some activity, and maybe I still have some slight edge. He goes rook to e7. I am trying to pile up on this f pawn here, and I play the move bishop to h5. And now he goes with g6. He could have tried, there's an interesting tactical try here, which, I don't know, it's probably too much to see in a blitz game. And also it leads to a position which also white has a slight edge. So I guess in both variations, white is going to come out of this a little bit better. But this is just interesting for all the tactics here. I thought I would show it to you. He plays knight e3, hitting my rook. I was planning to just go ahead and take here on f7. I thought this was pretty strong. I mean, I'm threatening to take this rook, and also he has to worry about the defense of his f8 rook, although it's adequately defended at the moment. But he can take this rook. I can take this rook, and then he has this check. So this is what I meant when I said he might not have seen all this in a blitz game. You have to look ahead a few moves and see that you've got this nice fork here. So king h2, so you can grab the bishop. I can grab the knight, and the material comes out even. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I don't know. I have an extra pawn. Yeah, so I still have an extra pawn in this line. But his king is reasonably safe here. He has the potential for a passed pawn over here. There's a slight edge to white in this position, but it would be another interesting way to play. Anyway, he went with g6, is also leads to a slight edge to white. But let's see. I take his knight here, because when I moved my bishop, I was also unmasking an attack on the knight. He takes my bishop, and then I should just return with my rook back to f2, and that keeps this slight edge for white. Actually, the way I played it, rook to f5, I thought this was good, but he has a nice counter in knight g7, and even though I can pin his knight here, there's not a whole lot that I can do to exploit the pin. And if he just pushes on with f6, then I can take, he can take, and then my knight is a bit awkwardly placed. It doesn't have good squares to run to. And let's see, Chess Engine gives Rook d2 as one of the better moves here. He can pile up and chase my knight around a little bit. And so what's happened here? Yeah, he's grabbed the pawn back, so we've got equal material. And he's holding on to this pawn in spite of the pin with his knight, and it just seems to be equal. So there's a position which, yeah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's equal material in this position too. Yeah, so it just seems to be leading to equality here with correct play. So it's actually this move here, King H7, is the one move that loses the game. And well, fortunately for me, this is a blitz game, but this is the kind of tactic I can spot in a blitz game. It's just a simple exchange followed by a fork. And the key point is that his king can't move to defend the rook. If his king could come over and defend the rook, then this would just be a big exchange. But because his king can't get to that square, it just moves away, and I emerge a piece up. And I don't do anything wrong the rest of the game, so we could just step through it. But basically, there's nothing exceptional going on here. I just managed to maintain my lead and gradually simplify the position to get into a winning position with the rook and the knight. And you can see we get around, after I manage to get my forces organized, we get to this position where my pieces are finally coordinating, and I'm going to start picking up extra material, and with the extra pawn I should win easily. The only thing you have to watch out for in an endgame like this is losing all your pawns. You have to make sure you end up with some pawns, because rook and knight versus rook is a draw if there's no pawns on the board. But if I got those extra pawns, I can use the coordination of my pieces to gradually round up his pawns, and with my extra pawn I will win. So he resigned at this point. Anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.